real product value has to be there, right? You're going to embark on a redesign of your store and put up a bunch of tarps. It's like, it better be worthwhile, right? And so that's one of the traps that we've seen a lot of people in organizations and teams that, have design systems and focus on them, is that these systems people care about consistency and paying down design debt and tech debt and stuff like that. But like from a product standpoint, it's like, no, we're trying to get people into our store to buy the things that keep the lights on. And so the trick to all of this is to hitch those efforts, right? These buttons and checkboxes and these little atomic elements floating around on their lonesome are never found in isolation, floating around in the ether on their own. Like, the whole reason those things exist is to make actual things that real people use. You know how you drive a car and you don't necessarily need to know how the inner workings of an internal combustion engine work?
Hi folks, this is Arseni with a new episode of Product Craft. Today's conversation is really special as I'm joined by the one and only Brad Frost, author of the famous Atomic Design Methodology, educator, speaker, consultant, musician, and just a great human being. We covered quite a bit of ground in this session, and it's packed with real-world wisdom that Brad shared so generously. We talked about what good means in the age of AI and the real role of a designer, practical advice on transitioning to a new design system, why component by component rollouts backfire, how to ensure design system effort connects to a real product value, Brad's thoughts on issues with handoffs and collaboration in general, and of course, intro to tokens and Brad's new Subatomic Course. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section. This type of content is rarely prioritized by algorithms, and so every like, share, and comment will help spread the love. Without a further ado, please enjoy. Now that it is so easy to take something kind of out of the box that looks decent, and people start to, take out those elements and Lego pieces and connect them together, it looks more high fidelity, than let's say, 15 years ago.
For sure.
Like, it was much harder to create polished mock-ups. These days, like, you can do it in 10 minutes, but then the question is, well, but is it good enough, right? Just because it looks good on the surface. And more often than not, it's not. But then you need to have someone in there who actually will say it, well, okay, sure, it's fine. So on the surface, it looks like a real interface, but is it actually good?
Yep. You describe, I mean, like, quite literally, we say this like every day. It's just like, is it good? And that's the role of the true role of the designer or of the team or whatever, especially now that the means of production is, changing, right? So it's like you have, AI, hey, AI, make me a website, and Claude will rip through and make you a website, no problem. But you need to be able to discern, is this good? And what are the criteria of good? And how do you, see that? How do you work with that? And how do you, iterate over that? And how do you ultimately make sure that what goes out the door is indeed good, not just good looking?
And also, in some cases, to go through the levels of persuasion to convince everyone else that maybe this is not good enough, when everybody wants to get it out the door as quick as possible.
Yeah. And there's some like good stuff where it's like you could kind of have those conversations and be eyes wide open with things. I think that's an art form unto itself, which is, here's the reality of which, there's, we always call it, there's the triangle, right? It's the, speed, quality, and
budget.
cost. Yeah, exactly. And it's like, pick two, right? And so it's like that kind of like balancing act is often not said explicitly. And one of my things that I enjoy being kind of coming in from the outside is to help surface some of those subterranean things, to just be like, okay, like what's more important here? Or like, all of this stuff is valid, all of this stuff is good, but like, how are we going to do the balancing act to make sure that things go out the door?
Yeah, what's your take on kind of the abundance of ready to be applied and used, templates and systems? Like, I mean, I'm sure that there's like, pros and cons to it on some extent, but like, how do you view it? Like, do you view it as a very positive thing, or do you view some of the, pitfalls as well?
Yeah, like everything, it's pros and cons. There's a time and a place. There's good stuff. There's bad stuff about it. So it's the question has taken many forms over the years. Once upon a time, it was why aren't we all just using Bootstrap, right? Like why doesn't the internet just adopt Bootstrap and that's it? Right
Yeah.
nowadays, you could say the same thing for material design, right? It's like, oh, here's this like wildly successful thing, very mature, pretty customizable at this point, and here it is, and you don't need to like build that stuff from scratch, and that's a huge leg up, right? You're going to ship better stuff faster, and that's the whole promise of design systems and stuff like that. So it's kind of like, oh well, this is a no-brainer. Well, why is the world not, why didn't we all just say, yeah, from here on out, no more other things, we're all just going to use material design, for instance. And again, once
Hmm.
upon a time is different tools, but that same sentiment, right? And so there are a lot of like legitimate reasons to use these other ready to go design systems and solutions. um, and just as you can fire up a Wix website or a Squarespace website, and there's a lot of valid reasons to do that. When people just friends of friends, it's like, hey, I need a website.
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, you don't want me to make your web. It's usually like, here here's Squarespace, start here and
Yeah.
sort of go
Would you say
there.
Material UI like kind of, I mean, one of the better ones? And there's Material UI and there is Material Design, right? There is two different ones. One is by Google and another one is a separate one,
Yeah,
if I'm
so
correct.
so Material UI is kind of like the React manifestation of material design. So Material
Okay.
Design is like this design system that is Google's design system, but it's open source, so anyone could use it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
there are different permeations of that, right? So for instance, you'll see there's a material design, Figma library that you could subscribe
Mm-hmm.
to, right? It's like one of the first things you see if you go into libraries. It's like, do you want to pull this in to your project, right? But then there's Angular implementations of it, there's React implementations of it, there's web components, there's a whole bunch of things, right? So that's the kind of relationship, is that material design is the kind of core design system,
Mm-hmm.
is defining the here's what this looks like, and then there's different technology implementations of it. And it's good, it's mature, it is supported by a lot of different technologies, so a lot of people use it, right? And they start there.
Mm-hmm.
But sort of similar to the Wix website or the Squarespace website, it's when you are, it could help you get going, it could help you get something out the door faster. And if your aim is you are a startup who is in the biotech field,
Mm-hmm.
your primary objective is to validate this product, right? Is like, is this going to work? So making that investment in a custom UI and sort of spending your time and attention there is a decision. And again, like everything, there's trade-offs. So you're like, okay, well, that's why Bootstrap has been so omnipresent in the world of startups and stuff like that, because it's, oh great, here's this stuff, we just quickly stitch it together, get it out the door, because it's a means to an end. Now that's a fundamentally different objective than, let's say, that startup was really successful and they became,
Mm-hmm.
you know, we work with a lot of companies where they're kind of in those like teenage years, where they've turned a corner, they're no longer like this hot new startup that's trying to prove themselves. Instead, they're trying to enter the next chapter, and that next chapter involves, we have more of an opinion about our brand and our experience and our tech stacks, and we have the people to support it. And there's a lot of things that we're trying to do. And it's kind of in those moments that a lot of times people kind of hit the walls of like what other people's stuff, which was made through the context
Mm-hmm.
of another organization's priorities, can do. So all to say is like there's a time and a place for everything, but what we tend to see is like this tipping point of, once you're kind of creating, building, and maintaining software, and you actually have opinions about that and how that
Mm-hmm.
works, it's a good idea to be able to, make the appropriate calls and say, we're going to do it this way and not this way.
Yeah, something I wanted to almost like go a little bit deeper on, something that I've been thinking about a lot, is this convergence from the legacy, like basically, as you just described, the use case. Let's say it's a startup. They started using some out of the box system. It was great. It allowed them to move fast, and they have their MVP or whatever. Maybe they even have now paying clients.
Yep.
And then they start to realize, well, we actually want something a little bit different. And then they realize, like, well, we're starting to, like, this third party thing fuels, our infrastructure, and we can't just easily do this. We can't easily do that. This component is not available. We need to do a custom one. And like, I'm sure that a lot of startups and companies end up in these situations about like, well, what do you do then? Do you scratch it and start over? Do you somehow migrate and start to introduce your own, custom components into this legacy? But then there is the question of, well, how do you make sure that it looks still cohesive, because you can't just change everything overnight? Like, I would love to like kind of go into this scenario almost a little bit, and like, what does a company do at that point
Yeah.
when they've,
Yeah, no, it's a great, like what you're describing is a lot of places, like it's yeah, not just your startups, but just especially for companies that have been around for a while.
yeah.
You have all sorts of creaky dinosaurs floating around, and it's like, well, what do we do with that? And that's historically been my role as a consultant, is to sort of get in there. And whenever, it's staggering to me, honestly, whenever I am talking with kind of the technical leadership at these pretty major companies, and it's like, well, what's your path, like what do you, is this thing meant to live, die, be totally burned down and rebuilt? Like what's this thing's fate? And they're like,
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, you might want to have an opinion about that. But like, to answer your question like more directly, is like, it really depends. It's basically like, what's in place is, to use a metaphor, it's like, here's this old building, it's
Mm-hmm.
like, here's this old building, and it's old, but its bones are good. And what we need to do is
Mm-hmm.
just strip it down to its studs and do the old gentrification trick and give it some Edison light bulbs, and expose the brick, and charge a bunch of money. Is it old and, oh, there's some serious foundational issues? And do you address those foundational issues and those cracks in the foundation? Or is it more, cost effective, but also just the right thing to do to level this thing and start from
Mm-hmm.
scratch, right? And all of that is a case by case kind of thing, to know when to do a light intervention versus something that's more serious but is still kind of preserving what was there before, versus a kind of declaring bankruptcy on this thing and starting from
Yeah,
scratch.
I mean, what if that thing, let's say, I don't know, let's say it's a mall and it actually works and it actually makes money.
Yeah.
And people in the neighborhood appreciate the fact that it exists there. And you can just close it down, and build another one next door, right? So the product is being used. It's important to the company.
Yeah.
It's generating now, but it's very clear that, I mean, if that mall is to stay up, with the competition, it needs to change. It needs to change, not only the look and feel, but perhaps have better, navigation so that people can, new elevators and whatever, right?
Yeah.
And so is there a way, like how flexible, like not necessarily, we don't need to go like super detailed, although I'm curious about that too, but like, are there ways to ensure that's gradual transition to something new while the product is still functioning and is in place? Like, and what are some of the common, like what are the things to ensure, maybe to make it happen? Like, what do you need to know? What do you need to lay out?
Yeah. No, I mean, there's a lot that can be done to preserve, yeah, keep the mall door opens while you're doing the renovations, right? Pardon our dust. Here's the signage
Mm-hmm.
around it, right? As like there's a lot that could happen, but in the world of pixels, right, we have additional luxuries, I feel like, which is to say you could change all sorts of stuff under the hood. We call it the Indiana Jones swap. So one of the things that we'll do is we will take a legacy website, for instance, and here's the homepage of this experience, not built using any semblance of a system. What we'll do
Mm-hmm.
is we will create a system powered version of that thing, uh, that looks identical, right, to
Mm-hmm.
what is there in place, and we will sort of like swap it out, right? So it's like from a user experience perspective, nobody will know the difference aside from some better accessibility and better performance and stuff because it's not a bunch of glued together, duct tape together
And
code.
would you rebuild the whole mall, or would you start to introduce elements, into the structure that will look indistinguishable at first from the rest, so they will still kind of look cohesive with the overall picture? So is that feasible, or do you need to like kind of rebuild the whole thing and only swap at that point?
Yeah, it's rebuild parts of the mall at a time. One of the things that gets really dicey, and we've seen plenty of teams try it, is like, oh yeah, we're gonna like start with buttons, and then we're gonna go through and update all the buttons across all of our products, and so the buttons will be new, but everything else will be old. It doesn't work that way. You kind of got to go like kind of page or flow kind of at a time. It's like wall off part of the mall, right? That's got to be temporarily shut
Mm-hmm.
down or whatever. You're working on that, and then you get done with that part, and then you're able to move on to like the next portion.
Why doesn't it work to go like kind of component type by component? Like, as you said, like let's start with our buttons, upgrade them everywhere,
Yeah,
then we'll move on to checkboxes.
yeah, because it is the surface area for any digital landscape at any organization, even if you're talking about two web experiences, but usually it's like you're talking about tens or dozens or hundreds or even thousands of software applications, and it's in order to get that first thing in there, there's so much work that happens, especially whenever you're just dealing with like the diversity of it, but also that's just like it's not valuable in that capacity. It's like filling up like a bathtub very, 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 very slowly. And kind of what you want to do, and what
Mm-hmm.
we've seen historically play out, in many different places, is it's like usually it's like, yeah, the homepage gets that new coat of paint, it gets the redesign, and then you like click into, the interior pages, and then you end up in like the older design. And now that's not ideal, right? Which is why it's important to have the vision, right? Have like the full mall remodel sketched out
Mm-hmm.
and planned out. Otherwise, you could end up in Frankenstein territory really quickly. But what we've found is that that kind of flow by flow or store by store kind of remodel is a lot more manageable than trying to update the outlets or like rewire all the outlets in the mall. It's like, and to do that all at once is just really really hard while
Mm-hmm.
while also keeping the mall still open.
So it essentially means that, yeah. So it's essentially means that if the company decides to go on this path of like updating something that is actually working and being used, then they need to accept the fact that there may be for a certain period of time this like no unification of the experience or maybe even the look and feel between the different parts
Yep.
while it's being rebuilt. And so obviously it's in the best interest of the company to kind of dedicate enough resources to decrease the amount of time while there's the dust everywhere. But yeah.
But it should be done in pursuit. And this is, I think, like sort of one of the things that we've learned over the years is that, like, hey, let's rework this experience for no real good reason aside from just to have it use the design system or to have it be a little bit more cohesive or coherent, or whatever. It's the real product value has to be there, right? It's like if you're going to embark on a redesign of your store and like, put up a bunch of tarps, it's like it better be worthwhile, right? And so that's one of the traps that we've seen a lot of people in organizations and teams that have design systems and focus on them, is that these systems people care about consistency and care about paying down design debt and tech debt and stuff like that. But like from a product standpoint, it's like, no, we're trying to get people into our store to buy the things that keep the lights on. And so the trick to all of this is to hitch those efforts, right? Those system efforts to actual product stuff, right? Like, so what's the thing that the store is trying to do and get done? And then those become the opportunities for the system people to sort of say, oh, yeah, like, well, we have all of this great stuff that can help, you know, accelerate that stuff, make this work go faster, smoother, with better results coming out the other end.
So essentially connecting this design system effort to the business
Has to.
outcomes,
It
business
has to.
impact.
Otherwise, what are you doing? Right? Like otherwise, this is just a side project, thought experiment, design experiment. It's this look at this nice thing that's hanging off to the side, but it doesn't actually deliver value. And that we've worked with
Yeah.
so many teams where they're struggling to demonstrate that value. And it's like, well, you actually need this stuff to help make the work go better and faster and smoother. Like it has to. Otherwise, like you are wildly missing the mark, right? So that's why atomic design all these years later is still, in my view, like this very relevant concept, because it's like these buttons and checkboxes and these little atomic elements floating around on their lonesome are never found in isolation, floating around in the ether on their own. Like the whole reason those things exist is to make actual things that real people use, coming out the other end, right? And that, as design systems have become a thing, we've seen this dynamic where like the design systems team and the product teams who are using the system have drifted apart. There's a distance that's
Yeah, I mean, if we like, I 100% agree with you. Like, I mean, it needs to make sense. Now, besides the consistency, right, that everybody talks about, I mean, one of the benefits or expectations rather of design systems, and maybe hopefully a benefit too, is that when everything is in place and when everything is working properly, it will speed up the development process and make it easier. Would you say that that's true, or are there, or like, does design system kind of like deliver on that promise? Like, can that be used as a rationale for, yeah, it's not just about that we're updating, one shade of green to another shade of green. What we're doing is, updating the system, the infrastructure, so that as the company scales, as we need to, like, as there is an increased demand on creating updates, we're going to be able to ship these things more efficiently and faster. Like, is that one of the reasons why somebody would decide to upgrade to like a design system from their legacy product?
yeah, 100%, right? And again, it's like the story to tell is, well, what are you doing on this legacy product, right? Like, what work is already slated to happen, right? What are you touching? What are you doing? And guess what? Our design system can help with that. And it's going to help you get the stuff done better and faster than you would do if you were to go it alone and have to build that entire UI from scratch. It's we've already we have it. It's vetted,
Yeah.
it's tested, it's sturdy. You're going to get all of this great stuff for free, and it's going to help you with your mission.
And I mean, there is one more. So, like in our metaphoric mall example, like we were kind of assuming that the company would use some out of the box design system, which kind of is great because there is some sort of a system. Now, there is also situations when maybe things are very custom and with like a lot of overrides, and maybe actually what's legacy is not that systematic at the end of the day. And so that, and it's like, does that complicate things even further when you want to now upgrade that? Like you have, your 10 shades of blue and, different looking buttons that do the same thing here and there, scattered around the product. And yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the way I like to say it is it's far easier to go from one system to another, right? So if you were to, it's like, say, as a startup, you use material design and you've hit the limits of it, and so you've entered this new chapter of the company, and it makes sense to establish your own design system to accomplish what you're trying to accomplish. We see it all the time. Makes a lot of sense. Um, that is a way easier effort than going from this total plate of spaghetti and turning that into a thing that's powered by a system, right? So it's like swapping out kind of like for like, or something that's already pretty reasonably sort of structured is a hell of a lot easier than going from this, just rat's nest of legacy code and just all sorts of inconsistent design and a bunch of just rickety old and just really gross uh, design patterns and stuff. Like it is a substantially heavier lift, and that's fine. I think it's one of those things where, again, it kind of comes back to, well, what are you trying to do with this
Yeah.
legacy thing? Because very often it is like, this is unacceptable. Yesterday, for instance, I was on my healthcare's website, and I was like furious with this experience, because it is a healthcare website, and I was like literally updating my billing information because I got a new credit card, for instance, and I had it like hooked up to auto pay, right? And the experience was so old and so crappy and so unintuitive for something that's so critical to
Yeah.
someone's ability to like receive health care. Like very, very, very bad things can happen if these things slip between the cracks. And that's what happened with me. I went in and I updated the new card information as soon as I got my new credit card. I went through, and because I already knew it was really crappy, I like went through and like did things and poked around and tried to find all of the nooks and crannies where my old card might be present. And I thought that I did it. And then my wife emails me and she's like, oh, it's yelling at me here. And I'm like, oh. And so I log in, and sure enough, the like credit card thing is buried in this weird carousel that was like, it looks like old school like jQuery something, and you like literally have to like go through this carousel, and then like hidden in the last frame is the thing that basically says add new card. And and you're talking about like people could go into medical bankruptcy, or not get a surgery or get their life saved because of this interaction pattern. So when you're talking about this, like this type of experience, it's like, well, clearly that pattern, it's not just, oh yeah, we just need to sort of swap out this carousel for the design systems carousel. It's like, no, that needs to be thrown in the freaking trash immediately. And we need to rethink and reimagine this. And is that more work than just doing a quick like lift and shift or whatever? Absolutely. Is that effort worth it? Absolutely. So it's just, you need to have perspective, you need to have a vision, you need to have like, here's what we're trying to do, here's this old crusty thing, that old crusty thing generates a bunch of money for us. You need to have a solid plan. And kind of coming back to my sort of genuine surprise whenever I talk to these leaders, like these digital leaders at these like big companies, and they're like, kind of, they don't have a perspective or solid answers on like, well, what are you doing with this thing? Like, it to say, yeah, I'm not quite sure about that, is like, you might want to sort that out pretty soon, because this thing is like a cash cow for you. You need to have a vision for how this thing is going to get better, because otherwise it's like you're leaving money on the table. People are frustrated. People are going to go elsewhere ultimately, right?
And would you say those are, I have a lot of thoughts on this. Would you say that those are design leaders, or not necessarily design leaders, who kind of don't have the vision?
Design leaders, developer
including
leaders,
design leaders?
and these are like, CTO kind of people, or VPs of technology, VPs of design a lot of times. Yeah. And it's not throwing anybody under the bus. Very often it's like, in some of the organizations that I've worked with, it's like, these are massive places. So it's like they have a bunch of those things. So it's like, obviously you can't be everywhere all the time, but I do think that it's important to kind of, the people in those positions need to be those storytellers, right? That say, here's where we collectively as a digital organization are going. And we all have to start like kind of like moving in a general direction here.
Yeah, the reality is that like with healthcare especially, which is the thing that kills me, is it's notoriously bad. And it's almost like, I mean, probably it applies also to maybe other domains too, with a lot of bureaucracy. Is like, it takes so much perseverance and will and desire to do something, like to push for like making those things better, that I feel like a lot of people just quit and just be like, okay, that's fine, we just need to get it out, and they don't want to take that extra responsibility and fight, because it kind of it takes a lot of effort, especially like if there's regulations. It's like, it takes so much paperwork and everything and all the processes to just even get something out. That very thought of like, well, is it good enough? Like, it's kind of just gets lost somewhere on the way, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's unfortunately how a lot of system level things are, right? So it's like I used to live in the city of Pittsburgh, like properly, right? And it's like the school systems, right? My daughter was 2, and we were already kind of going to the school, Pittsburgh public school like meetings and stuff, and you just see all of these really well intentioned young professionals with their kids who all live in the city, want to live in the city, are committed to the community, and are like, you know, they're like suiting up with their armor to like go to battle
Hmm.
to like fight for the system, right? And it's an utter and complete tragedy that it's like the people are like running these meetings are just like, yeah, like we're strapped, and there's not enough resources, there's not enough money, etc. And through circumstances we had to head to the suburbs, and my daughter is now going to school in a place where it's just like, you know the school has like amazing reviews and amazing reputation,
Hmm.
and it's just like it's just easier, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
so what you're saying is it's like these things, which are often the most critical, public facing things, yeah, like government websites, healthcare things, like really mission critical things that tend to have a fair amount of bureaucracy or red tape kind of around them, which requires a real perseverance and diligence and willingness to kind of keep going. I admire, it's like to say it out loud, it's like I admire all of those people who are doing that work. It is thankless work, it is tireless work, it is, they know to do it because it's the right thing to do, and they're willing to absorb a lot, even though they could probably go have an easier time elsewhere.
Yeah, exactly. And that's another thing is kind of the experience and the caliber of people who work there, because obviously, there is a lot of temptation, to work on a kind of more sexy, consumer product.
Sure.
And so, and that's kind of, yeah, it's, I ended up in healthcare kind of by accident, like through it just, it was, I used to, yeah, like I used to run a studio in San Francisco, and like we had a first kind of like biotech client and then another one. And so like one thing after another, and it's sort of like, okay, I guess, um, I developed like some expertise in a domain, and I never planned to necessarily focus on that. So I come from the broader design, with appreciation for the quality and for the craft. And it's like
Yep.
kind of one of the missions that I see is to, obviously, I mean, it takes way more than any single person, but to like bring more of that quality into these like complicated domains that really need that,
Yeah.
require that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Which is all the more reason that, again, have those metaphors, have those stories on hand. It's like to help people better understand, you know, what the value of all of
yeah.
this is.
So you have a studio as well, consulting studio, Big Medium, right? It's called.
Yeah. So as of this year, like kind of like late last year, I'm like now out on my own, and me and
Mm.
my brother have turned our attention more towards sort of education and courses. We're still doing kind of like we'll say like lighter engagements with
Mm.
companies, so it's like doing workshops and things like that. But yeah, like we've kind of like turned a corner into doing a whole bunch of other stuff. So yeah, it's been a kind of a wild new chapter because I've known client services my whole life. Before I had set out on my own, I worked at an agency, or well, a couple agencies, and so that's kind of what
Hmm.
I've known my whole career. So this kind of shift more into courses and education and just kind of helping people in a different capacity has been a wild ride.
Yeah, this is awesome. Congratulations.
Thank
Yeah, I
you.
think, yeah, congrats. The reason I asked is I was, and maybe you can still provide a perspective, is you see a lot of different companies with a lot of different situations, right? Like
Yes.
you throughout your career. And so I was curious, like, is there a sort of like a repeating pattern that companies come to you with, or like that they're experiencing the challenges, or is it more of like every story is unique type of thing? Like, for example, what we talked about earlier, we talked about like this transitioning from like legacy product to something new, you know, like,
Yep.
is that a reoccurring repeating thing? Like, what are some of the common things that companies are trying to figure out?
Yeah. I mean, yes. Like there's a whole bunch of commonality, and it's always fun. Uh, whatever, start working with a company and they're like, oh yeah, but Brad, you don't understand, we're a healthcare
Mm-hmm.
company, we're different, and we're slow, we're bureaucratic, we have like all these like people that like don't talk to each other, and then the next client's like, oh Brad, you don't understand, we're a financial company, we're slow and we're bureaucratic and we have all these people that don't talk to each other. Oh yeah, Brad, you don't understand, we're a retailer, we have all these really special things that are weird about us, we're slow and we're bureaucrats. It's like it's just very, very often, right? It's like what you're talking about are human beings working together, trying to work together to accomplish some things, make some things, manage some things, and that goes varying flavors of good to not so good, right? And so the common threads of like kind of what people are trying to accomplish, or like the sort of common like things that people are frustrated with, oftentimes plays out in the form of, we need a new website, or we need a new we're rebranding and that's going to fix all of our problems or whatever. And often there's this pattern of, here's this thing, here's this technology, here's this rebrand,
Mm-hmm.
here's this like thing that like we could kind of see and talk about, but under the surface are all of the humans and their ability to collaborate and work together in a healthy way. And it's usually, that's such a fun pattern to just see again and again and again and again and again. Because really, like what it comes down to, and it sounds like trite or overused, but it's like, but it's the actual truth. It's like everything, like actual success has very, very, very little to do with how good the design is, how good the tech is, how great the design system is, or anything like that. It has everything to do with people and their ability to work together. um
Mm-hmm.
100%, 100%. And so that, of course, that plays out in very different ways because everybody is different, right? And so you sometimes have, the cantankerous asshole is on the design end of the spectrum, and then the next organization, the cantankerous asshole is on the development side
Mm-hmm.
of the things. And other times it's just like, just a distance or an aimlessness, or again, like kind of like a lack of vision or whatever, or just people are distracted. And so, yeah, so
Do you think it's
there's
unique
all sorts of
to
things.
design? Do you think it's unique to design systems or
No,
just in general? Like,
no. Yeah. You're talking
yeah,
about, I mean, I think business, or like literally any, or I'll use the word organization in the broadest sense of it, right? Very
yeah.
often it's companies, right? And that's, usually like a corporation, but it could be a nonprofit, could be just like, an after school group. It's people, their ability to coordinate, collaborate, communicate, and
Hmm.
how successful it is, whether you're organizing a 5K, a charity 5K, or you're running a multinational corporation. It is how humans engage with one another, their ability to talk, their willingness to the environment, the design of the space to talk, right? Can people speak freely, right? And do they have psychological safety, right? Like, are they going to be shouted down if they question authority, for instance, right? Like, there's just like, you get into all of the dynamics, power dynamics, just all
Yeah.
sorts of stuff. And yeah, so yeah, design is absolutely not unique in its um, in that it is subject to the laws of interpersonal communication. I think what is interesting and unique to design is that very often designers have an understanding and awareness of that, and can therefore design better processes and design better
Hmm.
environments for more successful outcomes to happen.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, communication and how people work together. I mean, obviously, I think it's, yeah, at the core of everything that we do, and not just designers. But I was thinking more also from perspective of something unique to design systems, like an expectation. Like, for example, and I don't know if that's actually a thing. Like, let's say companies trying to figure out how to um, close the gap between design and development, and like maybe trying to figure out how to, have things automagically updating, as designer pushes a button in Figma. Like, is that are those like common expectations, and or maybe there's other things like
Yeah,
that?
that it goes back to that. Yeah, it's like that's what people say they want and
Mm-hmm.
need and what they're focused on, and really underneath it all is people's
Mm.
ability to talk to and coordinate with and collaborate with other people. And I have a lot to say about this, because I think that like the way that the landscape is going is that there is this really superficial sense of, oh, look at how collaborative we are, and look at how connected everything is, and here's the dev mode toggle, and here's
Mm-hmm.
this new thing, and you push the button and it like gets the developers what they need, and it's so much more collaborative, and it's quite the opposite. At a human level, it is quite the opposite. And I, not to say that we shouldn't have more capable and robust design tools, but like once upon a time, when Photoshop was the design tool, for instance, right? There are quite literally no responsive design capabilities in that thing. So designers were forced to have to engage with and have a conversation with the developers in order to sort of talk through how might this work in a responsive environment, right? For instance. And now the tool ecosystem has sort of grown up into this, what I kind of call this, like, good enough
Mm-hmm.
perspective that allows designers to hang out in their comfort zone, and all of their willingness to collaborate and develop. It gets to this like good enough perspective that, oh, the developers haven't gotten in touch with me to yell at me, so we are collaborating. Because it's there's this weird irony that's happening, that it's like, as all of these tools that kind of like tout designer developer collaboration and handoff and all of that stuff, it's like, I personally like hate the word handoff, because it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
it's bad, and there's something truly lost, like at a very, very deep, meaningful, and consequential level, when these different disciplines are kept away from one another. So when, always, and with, now it's with design tokens, it's like, oh, like, how do we just like push the button so that, the Figma variables turn into code, and we've seen teams, do everything to create this automation between these layers. And really, like, at the end of the day, it has everything to do with just like, you just need, you know, Gary and Jane or whoever they are to just talk to each other. And so long as they're automated, so long as they're in sync, your thing's going to be successful, right? And especially for something like design tokens, which is kind of like more of like a niche, like you don't necessarily like need everyone to be orchestrated or automated in this way. So it's like it's a very fascinating thing, and it's this phenomenon that people look to tools and technologies and how do we automate this and how do we do this versus kind of getting at the stuff behind that, the motivations kind of behind that, which is we're not talking to each other, we're not communicating. There's a bunch of things like slipping in between the cracks, or we're shipping subpar work, or these things are taking longer than they should. And the answers to addressing all of those issues, the answers are quite simple, which is y'all need to talk more. Y'all need to just get on the same page. Like before a designer goes off and does, 5 days worth of work and then like hands it off to the developer only to be told that it's not feasible to do any of that, or that this is like wildly out of scope. Well, a 3-minute conversation up front could tell you the same thing and save you 5 days of work, right? So there's like all sorts of great benefits that come from just being a cross-disciplinary collaborative team that's actually all kind of working towards the same goals.
Yeah, so you're saying like basically it feels like there's a bit of the over obsession with tooling, right? And like how instead of, and it almost replaces or pushes out the basic of collaboration and communication that should be there, right?
Tooling and process, yeah. Like agile, right? It's just like, assign the Jira ticket, right, to the next person, and that's, you call that collaboration, right? It's like there have been like all of these things that have, on one hand, it's a sign of maturity, right? We're not just like totally cowboy coding it, just like kind of winging it and doing all of that. So like a little bit of structure is good, having like, something you're trying to hit. There's a big difference though between having keeping a to-do list and having a general idea of who's working on what, and saying this is 4 story points, and just slicing and dicing this stuff into these like minuscule and discrete tasks that are just quite literally these like silos, right? Like they are like literally this person, here are your discrete tasks, and it's just like I find it disrespectful, dehumanizing, and antithetical to creating great things. And it's a shame that
I agree with you.
It's taken root.
I 100% agree. Like to be honest, yeah. Like I mean, I've been thinking a lot about it too, and there maybe is some of the fundamental difference in how an engineer thinks about a challenge from the designer. I mean, there is definitely some to that. Like kind of for a designer, it is important to understand the whole picture as opposed to just like one, granular place in the product. But then when an engineer starts to work at it, I don't know, like, I mean, that's what I do observe. Like oftentimes they do like to like, well, I'm just going to write a ticket, for this little thing. And I'm going to create another ticket for this other little thing. And then I'm like, well, that's great. But I want to make sure to actually look at the whole experience, right? Well, this little thing is rated, this one is not rated. But so like,
yeah. And
I don't know, like in my observations, like it's almost like, I don't know if someone is pushing that, or there is like a difference in just approach, or there must be a reason for that. It is strange to me as well.
Yeah.
to
Yeah,
like be
and
super
it's
granular.
I think that there's a lot of really fascinating reasons why these dynamics exist, and I think that like a lot of it has to do with just kind of what you know, getting back into power dynamics, and if what you're measuring is your burn rate
Yeah,
and
performance tracking, right? Like,
all of
well,
that. Yeah,
we've
exactly.
done 300 Jira tickets. We must be doing
Yes,
great.
no, exactly.
Yeah.
And again, it's like it's so what ends up happening is that I think engineers, who not all of them, but like quite a few engineers are that discrete, tangible, here's this objective task and I just need to sort of like get it done and move this ticket from the to-do column to the review column. Like, I get it. That's an attractive means of working. But at the same time, it's when it is done as a proxy for actual communication and collaboration, like when it's just like, I don't want to talk to you, put it in the ticket, and then we'll do that. That's a problem, because it is the engineer's job and responsibility to also understand that whole picture. Like like
Mm-hmm.
everyone needs to understand the whole picture. And it's that sort of coming together of this diversity of minds who are all sort of seeing things through different angles that ultimately paints a fuller picture. And when those people with those different perspectives, that engineer who isn't a designer, but you're in that phase of the work where you're defining what the hell the thing is, engineers have a great bit to offer in there. The QA engineers have a great bit to
Mm-hmm.
offer. The product owners, the product managers, like literally everyone who is a human being who has had experience on earth, who cares about the outcome of this thing, has something to offer, like real value to offer. And that's why I think that it's such a shame that this kind of waterfall process really has calcified. It has taken root in a big way at everywhere, pretty much. And that it's just like, oh yeah, like we don't have time. And I've heard this now for 15, 16, 17 years. Well, we don't have time. Like, I would love to do it that way, but we just don't have time. Once we don't have
Yeah.
time, because again, the designer burned 5 days putting together a comp that's totally unrealistic and isn't technically feasible. So like, that's the reason why there isn't the time, right? So it's like it's
Well,
the, how do you get those people just in a room together, actually collaborating, and all sorts of great things like fall out the other end of that ultimately save a bunch of time, a bunch of money, a bunch of agony, and ultimately yield better results.
and also, yeah, like about the no time, like, yeah, when I was doing consulting, I mean, that is also always the thing that I would hear is like, well, yeah, we don't have time. And it needs to be shipped in 1 month or something, like a brand new product. And the irony is that, yeah, and then I was able to convince more than on a single occasion to invest more time, because the reality is that there is never time. It's a constant. There is never going to be more time, but it's either you're going to be redoing this thing multiple times and it actually will take a lot more time, or you can actually save time to put a little bit more thought up front to do it a little bit better, which is going to eventually like last longer than just throwing it off every single time and always being with something that is shitty.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's and there's a real art form to it. And another metaphor, it's like when do you just like fill in the potholes? Like, Pittsburgh is just like full of potholes, and it's like, when do you make those decisions to say, this is, fill in the pothole, this will be done, quick patch, done, good enough status, move on, versus the time has come to mill the road, right, and resurface it, right, which is definitely a bigger effort, right? And there
Yeah.
really is an art form to it, but I think that it's important to get to a place where you're able to talk openly and honestly about that stuff and be able to collectively make these calls together. And I think that too often those conversations don't happen, and then like just things end up playing out the way they play out. And so it's like, even if you are cutting corners in the quality department, for instance, like back to what you were just saying, that's kind of okay, provided you're like, we've all had this conversation, we know that this is important, but this actual month timeline is really important because there's this like immovable conference where there's going to be 50,000 people in attendance, and like this actually needs to be there. To which you say, that sounds perfectly reasonable. Yeah, exactly. So it's just being able to actually like work together. And again, this is why that diversity matters so much, right? Like why cross-functional, like this stuff is such a team sport that it, no one piece of the puzzle has the full picture. And it's through that human collaboration and communication that you can actually see clearly that the picture, the thing that you're trying to do, right? Because it happens all the time where designers will go off and do a thing only to be for it to kind of come out the other end, and it's like, yeah, this is wildly unrealistic, right? That's a failure. That's a genuine failure. And whether you could attribute that to ego, to process, to anything like that, the antidote is to proactively engage, be curious, seek out your partners,
and learn each other's worlds and craft, and like talk with engineers, understand how they work and what they do. Like to me it is, and I'm like I mentioned it before, like I think it's very sad when there is a design concept that maybe looks great, but it just never saw the light of day. I mean, unless the point was to create a design concept just for the sake of an exploration, it's fine by all means. But like if the intent was making a product and it only was just captured and stayed at the level of just your Figma stack of Figma paper, then it's sad, and it maybe would have been much better had it not been perhaps as revolutionary, but actually made to see the light of day.
There is something like there's something lost there. And I do think that that like kind of like solo genius 10x whatever like language you want to throw at it, but it all effectively boils down to it's all about me.
Which is, I mean, I think, like, I honestly think that for a designer, sort of the KPI, so to speak, should be whether or not it's shipped and whether or not people use it. Because if it's not,
what's the point? All right. Again, what are you doing?
What are we doing?
Right.
Yeah. What are we doing here?
Yeah.
I wanted to, I have one question. I have like maybe two themes. I want to talk about tokens a little bit. But before that, I wanted to touch on like just the idea of ownership. And like there's different people have different, interpretations and like relation to this. Some people say, they don't like the idea of ownership. Some people say, ownership is great. But like when it comes to design systems, in the organization that is not like as robust to have, 50 people on a design system team, which then, okay, that team owns that system, but a smaller team, like who is the owner? Like, because to me, like design system, to just what we discussed, it's not just about design. I mean, it's kind of ironic that there is the word design, but it's really much more than that.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. Unfortunate name.
Without the engineers, like it's just not gonna happen. And so, do you view kind of this idea of like who owns the design system as like always having like almost the responsible parties on, at least on design, at least on engineering side, maybe someone else?
Yeah, we've seen it play out a number of ways, and that the owners of this infrastructure need to be people who care about it, and it needs to live where it will be cared for. And so we've seen it living in the marketing department. We've seen it living in the product organization. We've seen it living in the IT organization. We've seen entirely new things stood up to accommodate it, right? Sometimes there's like existing kind of shared things, right? Whether that's like backend APIs or things that are kind of shared across different products. It really depends on like sort of like the where these things live. As far as who owns it, it's like, so a design system, just to maybe put a finer point on it, it is an unfortunate name, design systems. It's like if we all had like a time machine, we go back and call it like user interface system or something like that, right? Because it's like, oh, user interfaces need to be built, they need to be designed, they need to be, all sorts of things. But ultimately, there should be the thing you want to work towards, maybe not a 50-person team, but you do ultimately want to get to a team who is looking after this really critical infrastructure that everyone relies on, right? It's in the same way we like to call it, front end infrastructure, right? Akin to, well, if you're an e-commerce site and you have a payments API, you should have a team dedicated to that payments API to make sure that the credit card transactions go through. That's kind of important to run an e-commerce company, right? So that's like ultimately where you want to get to is you kind of want to have a dedicated team, and that team can be small but mighty. It could be like a couple people. But starting out, it could be kind of tricky, especially whenever there isn't existing precedent in a company, for people who aren't necessarily just like assigned to a product, or assigned to an individual kind of like feature team or something like that. So sometimes we've encountered people that are like, well, we don't know, like that's like a brand new concept here, and so that does take a little bit more work to kind of introduce that here's this shared layer that doesn't yet exist, but it needs to. And so starting out, maybe those people are kind of like, halftime, they're 1 foot in the product world and 1 foot in like the systems world. And like, that's kind of okay to start with. And then you kind of iterate over that. And then you kind of like get to a place where, the system is pretty capable, but also it is actually powering several pieces of software, right? And whenever you sort of like reach that point, you're now like, oh, okay, this is actually, again, critical infrastructure that is being relied upon. And it's kind of like when you get to that moment, that becomes an inflection point where it's just like, okay, like we need to invest in this.
Like we need to make sure that like those people are actually a team and dedicated to that effort.
So yeah, so there's a way to build up to it. It doesn't need to necessarily like happen overnight. And in fact, we've seen it happen where it's just like they finally like get the budget approval, and then they like throw 12 people at a new design system team, and it doesn't go well because it's like you kind of need that kind of like small, you need sort of quick wins, then you need to stack those wins on top of each other, right? It's like you need to be like, oh yeah, here's that, back to the mall, right? We redesigned that one store and look at it, it kicks ass, it's amazing, everyone loves it, all the other stores get excited to get that same refresh, right? Like, so
Mm-hmm.
it's that kind of like, get some quick wins, be able to hold something up, demonstrate, hey, this works, this is good, do it again, then do it again, then do it again. And then the
Mm-hmm.
next thing you know, you have, yeah, like a handful of real pieces of product that are relying on this infrastructure. And then you could really have that conversation of like, yes, this is important, this is working, this is
Yeah.
delivering speed and quality and all that good stuff.
Does it work sometimes to, like, let's say if it's hard for a company to find enough like engineering resources to consider like contracting some things out to help out building, components, and then like, or do you find in your experience that it's better to keep things in house?
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've done for many years, is like we have been that sort of, organizations will consult with us, and
Mm.
we will be the ones in
Actually
there
build.
actually building out. Yeah, it's like,
Okay.
oh, here's like a web component library, or here's this React library or Angular
Mm-hmm.
library or whatever, and we'll do that. But I think like the trick is, a lot of times we've worked with organizations who have done that, and they're like, oh yes, this agency just kind of like threw the design system at us, and we've been making do since they've been gone. And so
Mm-hmm.
like a big part of our ethos is that, you know we've never been just a production shop. Everything that we do from like a design and build perspective, from a production standpoint, is through the lens of teaching the organization how to do that themselves, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's like we kind of come in to accelerate the efforts, and to sort of like do it because we've done it so many times, and we could kind of like help get things further down the road and in better shape than they'd get on their own. But the idea is like, in order for it to be successful in the long run, it has to be theirs. It has to be owned by them. They need to know this thing intimately. So yeah, so can you get away with some outside help to sort of get things going?
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. But there's like a big difference, and I'd say that like for people who are considering that, it's like you need to really be aware that, I think like a lot of places, and I used to work at these places, is like they're used to just being like, here's your new website, call us in 3 to 5 years whenever you need a new one, right? It's like
Mm-hmm.
that kind of like old like agency model. And that's what we've seen really to be really successful, is that like actual partnership, actual
Yeah.
collaboration, where we're like sort of spending time and showing people the ropes. And we'll kind of like do the first store and take the lead on the production, but then the second store remodel is more of like a 50-50 effort, and then by the third store it's like they're taking over, and then all of a sudden we
Mm-hmm.
kind of see ourselves out the door.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about time flies, by the way. I don't know, like I feel like we could talk for 10 hours. So let's talk a bit about tokens. Like we have
Yes.
like 20 something minutes. And so you recently launched a course. It's called Subatomic, and it's intended to cover design tokens in depth.
Yes.
And right. And I'm curious, like, how would you like, for those who are recent for those who are new to the idea of tokens, and I'm, to be honest, I'm kind of in that category too. I mean, I've heard about them, I know the concept, but I'm a little bit like, what exactly and how, like, what are tokens, design tokens, and why are they important?
Yeah. So for this last 12 years, we've worked with organizations who have a bunch of websites, a bunch of apps, a bunch of things floating around, right? Multiple products, right? You got a marketing site, but then you actually have like maybe the product itself, if it's a digital product, right? You have maybe like native apps. You might even have, for medical companies, maybe there's like medical user interfaces that are on these instruments. And we've worked with like so many different things. United Airlines has like seat back displays and kiosks,
Mm-hmm.
and NASDAQ has the freaking ticker in Times Square. Like, it's like there's all sorts of kinds of digital interfaces, right? And all of those websites, apps, digital touch points, as they're called, uh, should be coherent and cohesive, right? Embody
Mm-hmm.
brand best practices, UX best practices, front end best practices, certainly accessibility best practices, and so on and so forth, right? And so if we use this example in the course, we can all imagine Starbucks green, the pretty iconic green color, right? And that Starbucks green is everywhere, right? It's on their point of sale systems when you're in a physical store. It's on the signage outside of the store, right? It's on starbucks.com. It's on the iOS app. It's on the Android app, and so on and so forth, right?
Mm-hmm.
If Starbucks were to hire a new chief brand officer and they say, you know what? Green is old and passe. We're doing purple now, right? Starbucks is now
Mm-hmm.
purple, right? You're talking about a pretty significant effort, right, to roll that thing out, right? Especially whatever you're like considering all of these
Mm-hmm.
like physical stores, and you know we'll stay away from like the sort of like physical or non-digital stuff, but just even in the digital world, now all of a sudden you need to roll Starbucks purple out to starbucks.com, the iOS app, the Android app, all of this digital signage, the point of sale system, and so on and so forth. Huge effort. And we've been a part of a number of these things with a number of organizations where it's like you're talking about millions upon millions upon millions of dollars. You're talking about a serious effort to make something like that happen. So
Mm-hmm.
without design tokens, what that looks like is you have the new Starbucks brand book comes out, right? Like the old school brand book, uh, whether that's a PDF or a physical book or whatever. And it's like, here's Starbucks purple. Here's what that hex value is, right? And then all of the different websites, apps, and everything have to go in and swap out the Starbucks green hex value with the new purple hex value in order to do that, right? But that work is duplicative, is
Tedious.
disconnected, is tedious, it's fraught with all like things are slipping between the cracks, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? So that's the sort of challenge and the pain that whenever you're dealing with all of these organizations that are managing so much.
Does it mean that, sorry to cut you off, but does it mean that like unless you are this, global organization, with 50,000 stores, you don't need design tokens? Like,
No,
how does it,
yeah,
right? Like most companies are not, and I know that you were just using an example, like as a
yeah,
metaphor,
yeah,
but
yeah.
like, I would love to bring it to like, smaller size. Like, how does it apply and how is it useful in like in more, I don't know, traditional sized products, whether they're useful?
Like I have a brand. I have an aesthetic. I have this like orange and kind of blue and brown and cream
Mm-hmm.
kind of like color. And my by way of doing this course, I've needed to roll my brand out to things outside of my WordPress website, right? So it's
Mm-hmm.
like we're using this like online course platform, but I also have like a MailChimp newsletter and like all of this stuff. So it's like even little old me, uh, I need a token system to actually like deliver my brand, like my design language to
Mm-hmm.
all of the places that I need them. So like design systems in general, they're a good idea irrespective of the size. That the benefits become a lot more obvious when you're talking about the bigger and more diverse of a company it is, right? But like for instance, like when my wife was running a jewelry studio and she needed a website, of course I, helped her make that website. And by building it through the lens of a design system, that first page template took me 100% effort, right? But then that second page took like
Mm-hmm.
60-70% effort because I already had the header, I already had the footer, and I just needed to establish some new components to meet the needs of that other template. And then by the time I got to the third, fourth, and fifth page, right, like that effort goes down to next to zero, where that the last page of a 5-page website, I'm not having to invent anything new. I'm just simply like
But
putting this stuff
technically,
together.
even like without the tokens, right? Like in the original idea of design systems, like you could have your header as the component, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it can propagate to other pages. Like what is specific to tokens, and which things should be the tokens? Like for example, a logo. Like is logo a good example to have as a token because like it can be used? And how is it different from the way that you would do it before, tokens? Because
Yeah.
technically, you can just have an element and a component for the logo.
Yeah. So logos are weird in that they're kind of like almost more of like an asset, or they're kind of like more of like they behave more like a component than they do like but like tokens, what we're talking about are these kind of like design properties, color properties, like background colors, text colors, border colors, typography things, like here's our big jumbo display headings versus our labels for our form fields, for instance. And then things like border radius values and border widths and box shadows and animations and things like that. So that's kind of like what we're talking about with design tokens. And what establishing a token system does, just like design systems writ large, is helps you design things, create things in a more considered, structured, and more like rigorous way, where you're basically saying you're no longer just like sort of slapping, stuff onto a button or onto an accordion. You're actually sort of saying, oh, this is, we're delivering our brand background color to these elements. And so you're sort of describing roles for your design language. And that is like, so even if you're a small company, or even if you're only supporting one look and feel, you can benefit from this more sort of structured and systematic way of describing your visual language. Now, the cool thing is that by doing that and sort of doing it out of the gate, you get a bunch of future benefits for free, because the rebrand is always coming. That's one thing I've learned over almost 20 years of doing this. The redesign is always around the corner if it's not already there. So there's that. And then there's also just things like, oh yeah, like all of a sudden dark mode becomes a priority, or all of a sudden, oh crap, we need to sort of spin up this new healthcare thing in in response to the pandemic, or whatever it might be. And all of a sudden you just like have that infrastructure that you could then deploy, and which greatly accelerates those efforts.
Let's say in Figma, you can have, I forget what is it, like, you can have your color library, right?
Yeah,
And you
like,
can
so
say
like
that,
Figma variables is the means of creating tokens in Figma. Yep.
okay, so that's one of the, okay, so that's when you're creating your variables for colors, for example, right? Or you are creating tokens essentially.
Precisely. Yep. Yep.
Okay. And how do they manifest on the engineering side? Is that like, does it live in a CSS library, or where does it reside?
Yeah, so they tend to reside, like the source of truth for it is often, it's like sort of stored as just implementation agnostic, like JSON, where you're basically saying Starbucks green, this hex value, right? And then there's tools, and style dictionary is a big one, is a very popular one that basically takes that JSON and then can convert that into CSS custom properties, uh, Sass variables, a JavaScript object, iOS specific flavor, Android specific flavor. So it's like it gets formatted, but it's all kind of coming from that source of truth definition, right? So, and
I see.
that's really powerful, because that helps Starbucks.com, the Starbucks iOS app, the Starbucks Android app, and then whatever custom piece of point of sale software to all be connected and listened to and
So
hooked up to the token system.
okay, so let's say there is a designer listening to this, and he's like, okay, I love tokens, great idea. I want to make sure that we bring them in. What does that person need to, what do they need to tell to their like engineering counterparts about what do they need to set up? Like, is there a particular technological tool or stack that they need to whip up to actually support it? Like, what should be that, first couple of sentences of the designer?
Yeah, it's hey, come talk with me, uh, cause for one, we talk about this in the course a fair amount. Which, like, if you really want like the answer, like the like real nitty gritty, like in the course, we like go through comprehensively. Like, here's going from scratch. Here's how you stand this stuff up in design and code. Here's how it's all done. Here's how it's all orchestrated. Here's how you can automate this stuff, but also here's all like the human stuff that goes into like making sure that this is successful and synchronized. So that we cover in
Okay.
gory detail. But to answer your question now, is it's like, hey, here's this thing called design tokens. I think my first thing would be for the designer to say, what are you currently doing to define your style variables? Because what we talked about in the course is that developers have been using this stuff for many, many, many years. Like designers, this stuff is all new, because the tooling hasn't been nearly as robust or capable. It wasn't that long ago that everybody was just in Photoshop saying, layer 42, copy 2, copy 4, copy 7. And it's just a total mess, right? So now all of a sudden there's like this more rigorous way of accomplishing design in these design tools. But in code, developers have been defining variables in programming languages for a long time. So you have things all the way back to like Windows 3.1 and having like themable user interfaces, right? Where you're able to say like, oh yeah, like the menu bar top band is named this. So we've been doing this for a long time in code. So I'd say that for the designers, it may be a new concept, but for the developers, very often it's like, oh yeah, like we use Sass, or we maybe have some CSS custom properties, or there's many versions in ways that it's done. Be very surprised if the developer, uh, they're not using any semblance of variables, because like that's been a thing since like 2010, right? So it's like, when we were working with Caterpillar, for instance, it's like the code base already has like $cat yellow. And in order to like adopt the token system, the sort of transition was just to remap cat yellow to wire that up to the token, right? So I'd say that like it's an opportunity for the designer to get closer to the developer's world, to say like, oh yeah, we have these things, we're calling it brand blue, we're calling it brand purple, we're doing this stuff. Now it might not be perfect, but it's probably better than what's going on in the design tools. So that would be like
Awesome.
step
Awesome.
one. But then I think that like from like a, hey, we can actually sort of set this up in a way that is more connected, and that you're able to sort of like roll this stuff out as in these different formats and stuff. And kind of the best practice is this. Yeah, it's like step one is like define this stuff in JSON, which is, so it's like having like a repo code repository with a handful of JSON files in it. Here's where we define our colors. Here's where we define our typography. Here's where we define our shadows and our border values, for instance. That's like what goes in that stuff. And then you would be reaching for a tool like a style dictionary to basically convert that stuff and build it into sort of a consumable package that could ultimately be pulled in and wired up to, say, like a website. So that's like the broad strokes of it.
Got it, got it. So basically on the engineering side, on the implementation side, there may be multiple avenues for how to actually make that work, right? Am I getting that correctly?
Yeah. It's like I think like the main like headline though is like you're defining the source of truth as these like JSON files that basically say, here's Starbucks screen, but then there's also, and we haven't touched on this yet, but it's like you take Starbucks screen, and that's not the end of the story. What you're doing is you're instead mapping Starbucks screen to actual roles in a user interface. So you could say something like background brand is mapped to Starbucks screen. And what that allows you to do is that whenever that new chief brand officer comes in and say, oh, our brand color is now Starbucks purple, all you need to do is remap a couple tokens, and that will have this like massive ripple effect. So that's like where like a lot of like that efficiency and sort of scale comes from. But yeah, so on the engineering side, you are defining the stuff in JSON, and that also serves as this kind of like handshake in between Figma and code as well. And so that's where there's like Token Studio. There's like a number of different ways to do it. Figma has an API. Like there's ways to basically kind of connect Figma and this JSON sort of layer. Like that's kind of like the handshake. And then from there, depending on what applications you're supporting, right? So if you're supporting regular old websites, then maybe sort of converting those tokens into CSS custom properties and or Sass variables is what you want Style Dictionary to do. But if you're also supporting iOS and Android apps, for instance, then you would add these additional formats and sort of kick them out in that way and deliver them to those environments.
Got it. Awesome. Yeah, for everybody. Yeah, I'm going to put a link in the description for the course. I think that's. I mean, I think it's a great intro, at least for myself, to like, okay, let's like dive in and learn more about how to actually make use of this. Subatomic by Brad Frost, and you're doing it with your brother, right?
Yeah, that's right, with Ian. And and again, like we've been like implementing this stuff. It's been really great to kind of empty our brains, frankly, because we've been doing this work for a long time with a multitude of different companies that are all sort of different flavors of what we tend to call like multi all the things organization. So it's like multi-product, multi-brand, sub-brands, multiple technology stacks, multiple generations of a design language, multiple color modes, and so on and so forth. So it's been a lot of fun. But like this token system allows us to simultaneously like be able to use and reuse components while also being able to support wildly different aesthetics. And you're sort of so we're kind of like creating these things and managing these things as kind of two complementary systems that work together to deliver the right result.
Got it. Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. You mentioned that you transitioned away from consulting to more of being an educator. If people, after watching, buying and watching the course, if they still have some questions, like are you open for people like reaching out, and do you still offer some like services venues?
Yeah, thank you. I'm here to help. Is really like kind of like how it's going. I'm definitely doing like less like months long engagements, but definitely like helping different teams out in different ways. But happy to answer any questions or anything like that. But yeah, if people are looking for help, I'd be happy to at least chat. But there's also, of course, like a bunch of great other people out there that do this kind of work. But I think that yeah, what we're trying to do is to just like help. I think kind of set get more people to like a certain baseline and
Mm-hmm.
that allows them to sort of like move forward on their own, so they're not necessarily like we've been kind of for the last 12 years have been kind of going from like team to team sort of spreading the good news, and so now we're trying to like sort of scale it a little bit more efficiently, so it's been fun.
Yeah, this is awesome. Brett, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm gonna put yeah, as I mentioned, I'm gonna put the links to the course and to your website in the description. Is there any other contact or you want to mention for people to reach out if they do have
Yeah, I
I don't
mean,
know,
yeah, if you
question?
could find me, yeah, it's bradfrost.com is my website, but I'm on Blue Sky a fair amount. That's been kind of my Twitter replacement, I would say a little bit, and then
Mm,
also on LinkedIn and stuff as well. I'm pretty active there too. So
awesome. Thank you so much.
awesome. Thank you.